You ever wonder what happens when a band that's famous for being dark, heavy, and totally uncompromising, just decides to trade it all in for hairspray and pop metal? Well, that's the story we're exploring today. We're talking about how Celtic Frost, one of the most influential extreme metal bands ever, released one of the most disastrous albums in music history. So let's get into it, how one of metal's most respected pioneers ended up releasing one of its most infamous albums.
I mean, the transformation is just shocking. On one hand, you have the band that literally pioneered entire genres of metal. They were dark, innovative, and revered. And on the other, hairspray, melodic rock, and a desperate grab for commercial success. So the big question for this entire explainer is, how on earth did this actually happen?
To really understand the fall, you first have to appreciate the massive height they fell from. Before the whole Cold Lake thing, Celtic Frost weren't just another band. They were like an institution in the metal underground.
So they rose from the ashes of this incredibly raw band called Hellhammer. Celtic Frost, led by Tom G. Warrior and Martin Eric Ain, right away set themselves apart. They took all that raw aggression and pumped it full of an artistic ambition and a dark atmosphere that the scene had just never seen before. And their evolution was so fast and totally fearless. You go from the genre-blending debut in '84 to the absolute masterpiece to Megatherion in '85. And then, just 2 years later, the wildly experimental Into the Pandemonium. I mean, they were using female opera vocals and French horns. They were just constantly, relentlessly pushing boundaries. So here's the crucial point. Their identity was rock solid. You knew a Celtic Frost song of the second you heard it. You had Tom Warrior's one-of-a-kind guttural vocals, those crushing atmospheric riffs, and lyrics that dug deep into mythology and existential dread. But above all else, they were known for their absolute artistic integrity. They were the real deal. Which brings us right to the big question. Why would a band with so much credibility, so much respect, and a totally dedicated fan base decide to just risk it all? Well, the answer really lies in the temptations and the pressures of the time. To really get their decision, you have to look at the context of the late 80s. Glam metal wasn't just popular, it was a commercial juggernaut. Bands like Bon Jovi and Motley Crue were selling millions and millions of albums. Meanwhile, extreme metal, for all its influence, was still a pretty niche underground scene. The temptation of getting a slice of that mainstream pie, well, it was immense. And inside the band, a perfect storm was brewing. The leader, Tom Warrior, he felt trapped by that extreme metal tag. It was an artistic straitjacket, sure, but it was also a financial one. Being kings of the underground doesn't exactly pay the bills like being kings of the Pop-Tarts. Then his key creative partner, Martin Eric Ain, left the band, which removed this really crucial balancing voice. You add in new members with way more commercial influences, and the stage was set. And wow, what a change it was. Cold Lake wasn't some subtle evolution. No, it was a complete and total rejection of everything the band had ever built their name on. Musically, the shift was just unbelievable. Those crushing, dissonant riffs, gone, replaced with generic, radio-friendly hard rock. Tom Warrior's iconic growl, also gone, replaced by this strained attempt at clean singing. And the experimental, powerful drumming, yes, swapped out for a basic four-on-the-floor rock beat. It was utterly unrecognizable. And the lyrics were just as jarring. This is the band that once wrote about mythology and philosophy, now singing about partying and lust. You go from a song titled Cherry Orchards to tracks like Seduce Me Tonight and cringeworthy lines about juices like wine. The intellectual depth was just completely gone. But you know, maybe nothing drove home the sense of betrayal more than the new look. In 1985, they were dark, menacing, authentic. By 1988, they had rebranded with teased hair, makeup, pink clothes, and leopard print. They didn't just sound like a different band, they looked like a parody of everything their fans hated. So, did this massive gamble pay off? Did they find that mainstream success they were chasing? In a word, nope. Absolutely not. The backlash was immediate, universal, and completely catastrophic. The album was a complete failure on every single front. Their core fan base felt utterly betrayed. The critics who once championed them now just mocked them relentlessly. And that new mainstream audience they were trying to win over, they could not have cared less. In trying to please everyone, they ended up pleasing absolutely no one. The consequences were severe and brutally swift. Fans were just disgusted, The reviews were scathing. The album bombed, commercially. All the credibility they had painstakingly built over years just vanished in an instant. They got dropped by their record label, and the band itself just started to fall apart. And hey, you don't have to take my word for it. Years later, the guy who made the change, Tom G. Warrior himself, called the album a personal disaster and a huge artistic mistake. There's no ambiguity there. The band knew they had made a terrible, terrible error. So what is the legacy of Cold Lake? It's definitely not remembered for its music. Most of that's forgotten. It's remembered for the powerful lesson it teaches. The album has basically become the ultimate cautionary tale in music. It's the story you tell to warn artists about the dangers of selling out, of chasing trends that you just don't belong to, and most importantly, of betraying the very identity that made you special in the first place. And here's a number that really puts the damage into perspective. 16. That's how many years passed between the Cold Lake disaster and their true, universally acclaimed comeback album. That's an entire generation. But the story of Celtic Frost doesn't end in failure. Thankfully, it ends in redemption. In 2006, they released Monotheist, a crushingly heavy, dark, and innovative masterpiece that was everything Cold Lake was not. It was a triumphant, conquering return to form that reclaimed their legacy. And honestly, in doing so, it only made the scale of their earlier mistake seem that much bigger. Which leaves us with a final thought. The story of Celtic Frost and Cold Lake really forces us to ask a timeless question that every artist, and really every one of us, faces in some way. Is staying true to who you are more important than chasing what's popular? Celtic Frost learned the answer the hard way.